AITA, boyfriend, thought he was entitled to 100% of the sales price of a part that was thrown in on my purchase. I still remember the exact moment my stomach sank, and it wasn't when I realized what had happened. It was when I realized how quickly someone I trusted could completely misread the situation and feel entitled to something that was mine. I just finished signing the final papers on a car purchase, a decision I'd spent weeks researching, budgeting for, and stressing over, and I was thrilled. I'd even gotten a small bonus item included, a spare part for the car, something the dealer threw in as a thank you. It wasn't much, a simple accessory, but to me, it felt like a little victory. That evening, I called the dealership to confirm that everything was set for pickup the next day, and then I texted my boyfriend, Theo, get excitedly. Guess what? The dealer threw in a part for free. Can't wait for you to see it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was him. His tone in the message was, off. Wait, what do you mean it's yours? That part should belong to both of us. You spent the money, sure, but you know it's technically part of the purchase we made together? I stared at the screen, confused. Wait, what? Theo, I bought the car. I didn't ask you to co-sign or split the payment. It's mine. The part was included for me. His reply came fast. Yeah, but we're a couple. Don't you think it's fair I get some of the value if you sell it? I blinked. Slowly, the sinking feeling turned into disbelief. Sell it? Theo, I literally just bought the car. I wasn't planning to sell the part. I thought it was kind of nice that the dealer included it. Well, it has value, he said. If you were to sell it, I think I should get 100% of the profit. I mean, it's part of the car you bought while we're together. That's only fair. I froze. My chest tightened. Did he just seriously say that? This isn't some joint investment, I typed carefully, trying to keep my voice measured. I paid for this car entirely. The dealer added that part as a bonus to the purchase I made. It's not an asset we co-own. He didn't reply for a while. Then, this is exactly why I feel like I'm never respected in this relationship. You act like your money, your choices, everything is separate, but we're supposed to be a team. And now you're acting like you get to decide unilaterally about something I have a right to if you make money off it? I felt my hands shake. I read that text 3 times before responding. Theo, this isn't about disrespect. This is about reality. You weren't part of the purchase. I don't see how this is negotiable. The part came with my car. That's the deal. He texted back almost immediately. Unbelievable. You're really going to do this? Just take everything for yourself? I didn't know what to say. I wanted to laugh or cry or maybe punch a wall. I could feel my anxiety spike, my mind racing through all the past moments where small disagreements had escalated, but never like this. Never over something that was so clearly mine? I knew I had to see him in person. Maybe talking face to face would help him understand. I invited him over, my voice steady but my chest tight. When he arrived, the tension was instant. Theo didn't smile, didn't hug me. I just leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. So, he said slowly, about the part. We need to figure this out. I tried to keep my voice calm. There's nothing to figure out. It's part of the car I bought. That's it. It's part of the car we share, he said, voice rising slightly. We're in this together. You can't just pretend your purchases are separate when they benefit you. I didn't ask you to buy the car, I said, feeling a hot rush of frustration. I didn't ask you to co-sign. I paid for everything. You don't get to claim a percentage of something I didn't sell, didn't ask for, and didn't even intend to sell. He shook his head, pacing now. You don't get it. This is about fairness, about equity, about respect. You're acting like I'm being greedy. No, but I'm just stating that if you make money off something you didn't invest in alone, that's not fair. I blinked. My stomach twisted. Theo, it wasn't an investment. It wasn't meant to be sold. It's a bonus for a purchase I made for myself. How is that even comparable to splitting profits? His expression hardened. You're making this personal. That's exactly the problem. You think your money and decisions are separate, but we're supposed to share in the benefits. That's what being a couple means? Something inside me snapped. I felt the familiar rise of tension in my chest, the tightness behind my eyes. I realized this wasn't going to be a calm conversation. Theo wasn't seeing this as a misunderstanding. He genuinely thought he had a claim to something I literally owned outright. I can't argue with someone who believes entitlement overrides reality, I said, my voice shaking slightly but firm. The part is mine. End of story. I didn't co-sign the car. I didn't pay you to include it. You have no claim. He scoffed. You always do this, make unilateral decisions and act like I'm unreasonable for expecting fairness. You're selfish. I'm not selfish, I snapped, louder than I meant to. I'm protecting what's mine. And yes, I see a difference between being generous and being manipulated into giving up something I earned. He stared at me for a long minute, chest rising and falling. Wow, I can't believe you just said that. I can, I said, because it's true. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be a small argument. This was going to be a test of everything I believed about fairness, boundaries, and relationships. And honestly, I didn't know if I was ready for the fallout. I should have walked away then. I knew it. Every nerve in my body was screaming that. But something about seeing him there, standing in my kitchen, arms crossed, jaw tight, made me want to argue, to make him see why this was wrong. The next few days were exhausting. Texts, phone calls, short visits. Every interaction felt like walking on broken glass. Theo would drop hints, little comments about fairness, teamwork, how we do things in a relationship. And I would feel my chest tighten, my stomach knot. One morning I woke to a text while I was still half asleep. Thinking about selling that part? I sat up, my head pounding. No, I typed back immediately. I'm not selling it. Why does this matter so much to you? Because you're acting like it's yours alone, he replied. It's part of something we share. If you sell it, I should get the money. 100%. I blinked. Slowly, disbelief turned into anger. You did not contribute. I bought this car entirely on my own. The dealer added that part for free. It's not an investment we made together. His reply was fast and sharp. Unbelievable. You really think you can make decisions that affect us both without me? You think your purchases are separate? That's selfish. Selfish. I felt the word hit me like a slap. My vision narrowed, my chest tight. I had never in my life felt so misunderstood by someone I trusted so completely. I tried to reason calmly. Theo, this isn't about being selfish, it's about reality. Mom, you don't get to claim part of something you had no hand in buying or planning for. The part wasn't meant to be sold. It was a bonus. End of story. His reply came almost immediately. You're impossible. Always thinking your way is the right way? I don't know why I bother anymore. I froze. Those words carried the weight of something bigger. Not just the part, not just the money. It was control. It was manipulation. It was gaslighting in slow motion. I could feel the pattern forming. Over the next week, every conversation devolved. Theo started bringing it up in ways I hadn't anticipated, while we were eating dinner, while we were in the car, even in texts that seemed casual at first glance. He'd casually ask, so what's the plan with the part? Or, if you sell it, I expect my share. Each time, it was like a little poke. I mean, a reminder that he felt entitled, and I was meant to feel guilty. I tried to set boundaries. I told him, calmly, firmly, multiple times, this is mine. I did not ask for your input. I do not owe you any part of this. But boundaries didn't stop him. If anything, they escalated the tension. You always do this, he said one evening, voice low and sharp. You act like your money, your possessions, your choices are yours alone. You never include me. You never consider me. I stopped mid-bite. Theo, I included you in every part of the relationship that I could. I just didn't include you in a purchase I made entirely on my own. That's not exclusion. That's reality. He shook his head, pacing. It's selfish. You're selfish. You're always selfish. I wanted to scream. Not just at him, but at the absurdity of it all. And how could someone take a bonus part for a car I purchased and twist it into proof of my selfishness? How could someone claim entitlement over something they literally didn't pay for or contribute to? And yet, there he was, pacing in my living room, looking hurt, angry, entitled. And I realized something that made my stomach drop. He genuinely believed he had a right to it. I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling. The part sat in my living room, shiny and small, completely ordinary, and yet it had become a symbol of every argument I'd ever had with him about money, fairness, and respect. Every little fight where he implied I was wrong for acting independently. Every moment he used we're a couple as a weapon to claim control over something that belonged to me. I could feel my anxiety spike just thinking about what was coming next. I wasn't sure how far he would push. I wasn't sure how long I could tolerate the constant mental pressure, the guilt tripping, the manipulation masked as concern for fairness. And that's when I knew something had to give. I couldn't keep bending reality to fit his sense of entitlement. I couldn't keep compromising my boundaries to maintain peace. I had to either stand my ground completely or walk away from a relationship that had suddenly revealed itself as something toxic in disguise. The next morning, I decided to take a deep breath and call my best friend, Leora. I needed someone who could hear the story without judgment. Someone who could help me sort out what was real and what was manipulation. Okay, I said when she picked up. I need you to tell me if I'm crazy here. My boyfriend thinks he's entitled to 100% of the value of a part the dealer threw in on my car. He wants it if I ever sell it. There was silence on the line. Then she laughed, incredulous. Wait, what? He's serious? Yes, I said, my voice tight. I told him it was mine. He said that's selfish and unfair. He said we're supposed to share in everything, even if he didn't contribute. She was quiet again, then said slowly, wow, that's messed up. That's not just entitled. That's controlling. That's not normal. I felt a little relief hearing it out loud. Validation from someone outside the spiral made my chest feel lighter. But, she continued, what are you going to do? I didn't answer immediately. I knew my next steps would matter. If I compromised, no, I would set a precedent that my boundaries didn't matter. If I walked away, I'd risk confrontation, heartbreak, and the potential unraveling of what I thought was a stable relationship. I felt trapped between fairness, loyalty, and self-preservation, and I realized with a sinking heart that this wasn't going to be simple. After I hung up with Leora, I felt slightly steadier, but the tension didn't go away. It lingered in my chest, heavy and persistent, like a weight I couldn't shake. I paced my apartment, hands tugging at my hair, thinking about the absurdity of the situation. A small bonus part the dealer had tossed in as a courtesy. And yet it had somehow become the center of an emotional storm, a test of my loyalty, and an excuse for Theo to assert control. By the afternoon, I knew I couldn't just sit there and stew, and I had to face him. Not confrontationally, not angrily. I told myself I'd try one more calm conversation. But even that felt impossible. The memory of the last few days made my stomach churn. When he arrived, I noticed the way he leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, eyebrows drawn together. The look itself made my chest tighten. So, he started casually, like this was nothing. Have you thought more about the part? I froze for a moment. My hands were gripping the countertop, nails digging in. Yes, I said slowly, forcing myself to sound calm. And my answer hasn't changed. It's mine. End of discussion. He laughed, low and sharp, and I felt a cold pit in my stomach. You're unbelievable. You really think you can make decisions like this, and I'm supposed to just accept it? You never contributed to the purchase, I said, my voice rising despite myself. I didn't ask you to co-sign or pay anything. The dealer included the part for me. There's no claim you can make. You're acting like my opinion doesn't matter, he shot back, pacing now. Like it's not fair for me to get a share if you sell it. You've done this before? Always acting like your way is the only way. It's exhausting. And honestly, it's selfish. The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. Again. Not just in text this time, in person, spoken with all the weight of accusation behind it. I felt my jaw tighten, my chest constrict. This wasn't just about a part anymore. It was about control, about being forced to feel guilty for simply asserting my rights. I'm not selfish, I said, my hands shaking slightly. I'm defending what's mine, and if you can't accept that, then the problem isn't with me, it's with how you define fairness. He stopped pacing and looked at me with this cold, incredulous stare. You're twisting this. You make everything about yourself. You act like you're the victim in every situation, but this is about teamwork, about shared life. You don't get it. I felt my stomach twist. Teamwork? Shared life? We had shared life in moments, sure, but we had never been required to share everything. I had boundaries, and those boundaries weren't negotiable. Not in this. Not on something I'd worked for. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You're being ridiculous. I'm not asking for much. Just a percentage if you sell it. Is that really so hard? Hard, I shouted, my voice louder than I meant to. It's impossible because it's not yours. You didn't pay for it. You didn't ask for it. You don't even plan to sell it, yet you act like this is an attack on you. That's entitlement, Theo. That's not normal. That's not fair. For a moment, the room went quiet. I thought maybe he'd finally hear me. But instead, his lips pressed into a thin line. Wow, he said finally. You really don't see how selfish this is. You always think your needs come first. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not sobbing, but that tight, raw sting that comes when someone you trust attacks your integrity. You're right, I said, my voice shaking. My needs do come first, because I don't get to survive if I keep letting other people control what's mine. And this isn't about the part. This is about every time I've had to compromise my boundaries to avoid conflict with you. He shook his head, exasperated. Boundaries? Really? Is that what you call it? Yes, I said, nearly whispering now, the tension making my voice tremble. Boundaries, respect. You can call it whatever you want, but it's my life, my car, my choices, my money. If you can't accept that, then maybe this isn't a relationship you should be in. He laughed again, bitter and incredulous. So, this is a threat now? No, I said, taking a deep breath to steady myself. It's reality. I can't keep bending for someone who refuses to see what's right in front of them. The room was thick with tension. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my chest tight, my hands trembling slightly. Every instinct in me was screaming to get out, to leave before this spiraled even further. But part of me stayed, trying to reason with someone who wasn't reasoning. Finally, he ran a hand through his hair and said slowly, almost quietly, You're impossible. I don't know why I bother. That's when I felt it, the cold clarity. I realized I had been trying to fix something unfixable. I had been trying to reconcile reason with entitlement, and it wasn't going to work. Not here, not with him. I took a step back. Then maybe we should both take a moment to think about what this relationship is really built on, I said. He glared, but didn't respond. He left an hour later, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, chest heaving, shaking, staring at the car key fob in my hand and the bonus part still sitting innocuously on the table. It was small, almost laughably ordinary, but to me, it had become a symbol of everything I wasn't willing to compromise anymore. My autonomy, my boundaries, my sense of self. I spent the next few days in a haze of texts, some ignored, some arguing, some manipulative. Friends started noticing, asking if I was okay, if something had happened. And when I explained, their reactions ranged from shock to disbelief. No way, one friend Rena said over coffee. He thought he was entitled to that? That's insane. It feels insane, I admitted. Because I want to believe he's reasonable, but the more I try to explain, the more he doubles down. It's like he's twisting reality. It's manipulation, Rena said quietly. It's emotional control. You don't have to justify yourself. You just set the boundary and enforce it. Her words sank in. Slowly, painfully, I realized that I couldn't just explain my way out of this. I couldn't plead, negotiate, or compromise. The only thing I could do was stand firm, or walk away. And for the first time in a long time, none I felt the weight of the choice. I didn't want it to end in heartbreak. I didn't want it to explode publicly. But I knew if I didn't protect myself, I'd lose more than a small bonus part. I'd lose a sense of who I was, the ability to assert my rights, the foundation of my own life. That night, I sat alone, staring at the part on the table, the text from Theo flashing in my mind, and felt my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt since childhood arguments where my voice didn't matter. I realized that this wasn't a fight I could win with words alone. I had to decide if I would let someone else rewrite my reality, or if I would finally take back control of mine. And for the first time, I understood that standing up for myself might cost me everything, but it would also be the first moment I truly owned my life. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. It was the kind of tight, buzzing tension that made your muscles ache before you even roll out of bed. Theo hadn't texted, but I knew it was coming. He always followed the pattern: confrontation, silence, then passive-aggressive escalation. I tried to distract myself with work, but my mind kept circling back to the part on my kitchen table. That small, innocuous object had become a symbol of something much larger: control, entitlement, and the way someone you trust could twist your reality to suit themselves. I couldn't stop thinking about the texts, the pacing, the accusations. Selfish? Impossible. You don't see how unfair this is. The words echoed in my head, sticky and heavy. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Theo. Maybe we need to talk. Face to face. I stared at the screen for a long time. My instincts screamed no, but a small, stubborn part of me wanted one final chance to reason with him. Maybe if he saw my frustration, my reasoning, he'd realize how ridiculous this had become. Maybe. I met him at a small park, a neutral space. The air was crisp, wintry, and the world felt indifferent to our conflict. Theo was already there, leaning against a tree, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, eyes darting as if searching for the right words. Hey, he said cautiously. Hi, I replied, voice tight but controlled. We walked slowly along the path, silence stretching between us. Every few steps, he glanced at me, hesitation in his eyes like he was deciding whether to attack or plead. Finally, he stopped. I don't understand why you're being like this, he said. Yeah, it's just a part. It's not like it's huge money. Why do you have to act like it's a war? It feels like a war because you're trying to claim something that isn't yours, I said, keeping my tone calm despite the adrenaline pumping through me. It's not about the money, it's about control. Every argument, every text, every accusation, it's about you asserting ownership over something I earned and worked for. He shook his head. You're exaggerating. I just want what's fair. You make it sound like I'm some villain. That's not fair either. I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Theo, fairness isn't subjective when reality is objective. You didn't buy the car. You didn't contribute to it. The dealer included the part for me. If you can't accept that, then this isn't a disagreement. It's an entitlement issue. He clenched his jaw. You always make everything about you. You never see my side. You're impossible. I felt my chest tighten again. The same exhaustion, the same helplessness I'd felt for days, weeks, months. But this time, I pushed it aside. No, I said firmly. I see your side. I see that you feel entitled. But entitlement doesn't override reality, and it doesn't get to dictate my choices. He looked at me, incredulous, like he couldn't process that I was standing my ground. And for a moment, I realized he wasn't going to budge. He couldn't. His sense of ownership was too tied to his ego, to the way he defined fairness, to the illusion of partnership he thought we had. I just don't get it, he said finally, voice quieter now, almost pleading. I thought we were a team. How can you be so cold about this? I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, on the raw sting of frustration and sadness. I'm not cold. I'm protecting myself. Being a team doesn't mean sacrificing your boundaries or pretending entitlement is reasonable. If that's what you believe, then maybe we're not as compatible as we thought. For a long silence, he said nothing. The wind moved through the bare trees, the world continuing around us like nothing had changed. I felt my own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, and realized I had never felt so certain about a decision in my life. I don't know what you want me to say, he muttered finally. I want you to understand, I said softly. But I also know you won't, so I'm done trying to convince you. He didn't respond. We walked back to the parking lot in silence. When we reached the car, he opened the driver's side door and looked at me one last time. Nay, this isn't over, he said. I nodded once. It is, for me. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The confrontation had been painful, raw, and emotionally draining. But it had clarified everything. I didn't have to argue endlessly to justify my rights. I didn't have to bend reality to meet someone else's expectations. And I certainly didn't have to sacrifice my boundaries for someone who refused to respect them. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, looking at the part. Small, unassuming, mundane. And yet, it represented so much more. Autonomy, self-respect, clarity, and the courage to choose myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just calm. I knew the fallout wasn't over. Theo could still escalate, say things to friends, family, anyone who would listen. But I felt ready. I had documented everything. The texts, the conversations, the threats of entitlement. I wasn't going to let someone's skewed sense of fairness rewrite my life. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a part. It wasn't even really about money. It was about respect, boundaries, trust, and the courage to walk away from someone who refuses to honor them. For the first time, I realized I wasn't scared. Not really. I was sad, yes, and frustrated, and a little broken, but not powerless. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had already won the most important part. I had chosen myself. The days after that confrontation were surreal. Theo didn't show up at my apartment again, but he found other ways to make his presence felt. Texts, subtle comments in group chats where friends could see. Even during work calls, he'd somehow managed to slide in a remark about fairness, ownership, or how I never see his side. Every message was like a tiny weight pressing down on me, a reminder that this wasn't just about a part anymore. It was about him testing boundaries, pushing limits, and trying to make me doubt myself. One afternoon, I got a text from my friend Leora. Hey, have you heard from Theo lately? He just told some of our mutual friends that you're being ridiculously controlling about the car part. They think you're overreacting. I felt my stomach twist. That sick, heavy knot that comes when you realize someone is rewriting reality hit me hard. I stared at the screen for what felt like 5 minutes, my mind spinning. Manipulation, gaslighting, betrayal. All those words I had whispered to myself suddenly had a louder echo. I called Leora immediately. He's saying I'm controlling? About the part? My voice cracked a little. Yes, she said carefully. I tried to explain your side, but some people already heard his version first. He's really good at spinning things. I sank onto my couch. The small part on the table seemed to mock me, the absurdity of it all crushing. A part. That's what had started this chaos, and now it was snowballing into a drama that involved my friends, my reputation, and my sanity. I realized I had two options. Engage and defend myself publicly, risking more confrontation, or step back entirely and let the narrative play out without my participation. Both felt terrifying. The next day, I got a call from my cousin, Nina. She sounded hesitant, almost nervous. Hey, I just wanted to check in. I heard what Theo's been saying. Are you okay? I could hear the judgment in her voice, or maybe it was just worry. I'm managing, I I said, swallowing hard. I just need people to hear the facts, not the spin. She sighed. It's complicated. Everyone's taking sides already. And that was it. The floodgates had opened. Friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives had opinions. Some asked me for details, some took Theo's side without asking, some didn't ask at all. And each interaction made my chest tighter, my anxiety worse. I felt like I was being suffocated by the story he'd built around me, the narrative that painted me as selfish, controlling, and unreasonable. I spent hours that evening documenting everything. The texts, the calls, the confrontations, the in-person arguments, every little detail, every word. I knew this wasn't just about a part anymore. And it was about protecting myself, my reputation, and my reality. Then, late that night, Theo texted again. Do you really think ignoring me will solve anything? You're being childish, and everyone is noticing. You need to think about how this makes you look. I felt a surge of anger and exhaustion. I could see it clearly now. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't reasoning. He was trying to manipulate everyone, including me, into accepting his entitlement as truth. I typed carefully, slowly. The part is mine, my purchase, my decision. I will not debate this further. If you continue to misrepresent the situation to friends or family, that's on you, not me. I've tried to reason. I've tried to explain. I'm done. He didn't reply, but the silence didn't last. Within days, I started getting messages from friends I barely spoke to, mind relaying Theo's version. Some were gentle, some accusatory. Every time I felt that tight, anxious weight. Every time I had to repeat my story, explain myself, and hope someone would believe me. It reached a peak when my coworker mentioned Theo had told their partner that I was overly controlling and untrusting. That comment cut deeper than I expected. Not because it wasn't true to him, but because it was a deliberate twist on reality meant to isolate me, make me doubt myself. I broke down that night, crying, pacing, trying to calm the racing thoughts. I felt trapped in a web I hadn't asked for, one that threatened my friendships, my reputation, and my sense of sanity. I realized this was bigger than a part, bigger than a car, bigger than a relationship. Yeah, this was about someone weaponizing their perception of fairness to rewrite reality and guilt me into compliance. I called Leora again, and this time I cried openly. I can't deal with all this. It's not just the part anymore. It's everyone, all at once. He's making it impossible to feel like anything I do is right. She was silent for a moment, then steady and firm. You're not wrong. This is manipulation. You're not overreacting. You've documented everything. You're standing up for yourself, and that's more than most people do. Her words helped, just enough to steady me for the next step. I couldn't fight Theo emotionally in every corner of life, but I could protect myself. I could set boundaries. I could refuse to participate in the narrative he was creating. Over the next week, I sent a carefully worded message to a few mutual friends who had asked for my side. I didn't over-explain. I didn't defend myself emotionally. I simply stated the facts. I purchased the car independently. The dealer included the part as a bonus, and Theo had no financial claim to it. I attached screenshots, dates, and everything documented. Some friends immediately understood. Some needed time. A few still sided with him initially, but at least I had truth on my side. And more importantly, I had my peace of mind. By the end of the month, Theo's manipulations had lessened. The constant messages slowed. Some friends who had questioned me apologized quietly. Some remained distant, but that was okay. I realized the emotional peak had passed. I'd survived the lies, the entitlement, the gaslighting. I'd stood firm when everything around me seemed to suggest I was the one in the wrong. Sitting in my apartment one evening, staring at the small part on my table, I realized how much I had grown through this. It was ridiculous, almost laughable that something so tiny had triggered such chaos. But it had forced me to confront boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to walk away from manipulation. And in that moment, I felt a quiet triumph. Not loud, not vindictive, just steady. I hadn't let someone else's entitlement rewrite my life. I had survived, and I had chosen myself. After the chaos had settled, life felt quieter. Not perfect, not resolved in a fairy tale way, but quieter. I had cut back contact with Theo almost entirely. He would send the occasional passive-aggressive message, but I stopped responding. On each time I resisted the urge to explain myself, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. I started focusing on myself again. Work, hobbies, friends, my life that had been crowded with anxiety and manipulation slowly began to feel like my own. I reconnected with people who mattered, who had supported me from the start. The friends who had taken Theo's side gradually faded from my life, and that was okay too. I realized that not everyone had to understand or even agree. I just had to be honest about the truth and consistent with my boundaries. The small part sat on a shelf in my apartment, almost ordinary now, but it had become symbolic for me. Every time I saw it, I remembered the argument, the text, the confrontation, and the emotional turmoil. I remembered the moment I realized that standing up for myself might cost me relationships, and comfort, and peace. But it was necessary, and somehow, holding on to that clarity gave me strength. A few months later, I ran into Theo briefly at a mutual friends gathering. He was cordial, maybe even slightly sheepish, but I didn't feel the urge to engage. I smiled politely, kept my distance, and let him talk to others. The tension I had felt before was gone. I realized I no longer needed him to acknowledge my side or validate my experience. I had validation in myself. I had proof in the documented texts, the timeline, and the fact that I had stood my ground without compromising my integrity. I thought about writing the whole story down at one point, almost like therapy, to make sense of it. How entitlement can masquerade as fairness, how manipulation can look like concern, and how easy it is to get trapped in someone else's version of reality. But I also realized that for me, the story wasn't about public judgment, it was about self-respect, about boundaries, about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. I still think about the part occasionally, not with anger, not with longing, just as a reminder of the lesson it taught me. That small, mundane object had been a catalyst for growth. It showed me that people could try to rewrite my life, but I could choose what to accept and what to protect. I also think about Theo and how differently the story might have ended if I hadn't stood firm. The quiet sense of triumph isn't about being right or winning a fight. It's about realizing that your own voice, your own boundaries, and your own life are worth defending. And for the first time in months, I felt a deep, steady peace that hadn't been there before. Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers the argument, or if the entitlement and frustration have faded into the background for him. I don't dwell on it. I don't need closure from him. I found it in myself. Life moved on. I found joy in small things again, taking walks without guilt, spending time with friends without anxiety, making purchases without justification. I learned to recognize when someone's sense of fairness is really about control and to never let myself be manipulated by it again. And when someone asks me about that small car part, the story I could tell with laughter or frustration, I simply smile and say, it wasn't really about the part, it was about boundaries. Because in the end, that's all that matters. It's been almost 2 years since the whole car part debacle. Mine, and looking back now, it feels almost surreal. I don't dwell on it daily, but the lessons linger in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. I've moved into a new apartment, changed jobs, and rebuilt a life that feels entirely my own. I still see Theo occasionally at social events. Sometimes he's polite, sometimes distant, but I no longer feel the compulsion to justify myself or defend my choices. I've realized that my peace isn't dependent on him acknowledging the truth. It's dependent on me respecting my own boundaries and staying true to my values. I even laugh sometimes when I think about the absurdity of it all. A small bonus car part turned into a months-long saga of entitlement, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. It's almost cinematic, but the stakes were real, and the emotional exhaustion was very real too. I've learned to spot entitlement disguised as fairness from a mile away now, and to protect myself before it escalates. The friendships that survived this period are stronger. People who doubted me or were influenced by Theo's version of events either faded out or learned the truth. I realized that not everyone's opinion matters, and that it's okay to let go of people who can't respect my autonomy. Sometimes, when I see someone struggling with manipulation or control in a relationship, I think about that small part on my kitchen table and how fiercely I had to stand up for myself. I think about the anxiety, the confrontation, and the aftermath. And I remember that the decision to prioritize my boundaries was the most empowering choice I've ever made. Life now feels calmer, but it's richer in a subtle way. I understand myself better. I understand what it means to assert my rights without guilt, and I know how to recognize manipulation before it becomes a crisis. Most importantly, I understand that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. When people ask me now about Theo or the car part, I smile and give a short, quiet answer. It wasn't really about the part, it was about boundaries and respect. And that's enough. I don't need to argue, I don't need to convince anyone, and I don't need to go back. The lesson has been learned, and I've carried it forward. I still walk sometimes, alone, thinking about how much energy I spent trying to appease someone else and how liberating it is to no longer do that. The part remains on a shelf in my apartment, mundane and small. But now it's a reminder of strength, clarity, and self-respect. A tiny object that once caused chaos now represents resilience. And as I look around my life, I realize something important. I didn't just survive the entitlement and manipulation, I grew from it. I became steadier, more confident, and more unapologetically myself. And that growth? That's something no one can take from me. Standing up for myself, even when it was messy and exhausting, was worth every tear, every argument, and every sleepless night. I didn't just defend a car part. I defended my life, my choices, and the person I've worked so hard to become. And that's enough.